It is now 6 o'clock, and I hereby call the June 20th, 2023 City Commission meeting to order, and we'll begin with the roll call. City Clerk?
Mayor Hassel.
Present.
Commissioner Butler.
Present.
Commissioner Motta.
Here.
Commissioner Morse.
Present.
Mayor, we have 4 commissioners present. The quorum of 3 is met.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Are there any commissioner comments this evening before we get started?
Yes. I would just like to call attention to the Juneteenth events this last week and last weekend, and they were just very enjoyable. There were other events in town that competed, but at City Park, I appreciated the Parks and Rec Department and the city support for the programs, because Arts in the Park was part of that Juneteenth program. And it's always good to see the elected officials out and about when we have a big community event. And the next meeting, Arts in the Park is every Friday night at 8. And then on Tuesdays tonight, beginning at 7:30, is the municipal band. I'd like to encourage people to participate in that. And I want to call attention to the next meeting of the City Commission will be on June 27th at a work session. And then the 4th of July is the following Tuesday, so we will not have a meeting. And then the next one after that will be July 11th. So just so you know, we're having a hiccup here in our sequence of meetings. And that's all. Thank you.
All right. We will move into the consent agenda. The consent agenda are items of a routine or housekeeping nature or have been previously reviewed by the commission. A commissioner may vote to request an item be removed for separate discussion and consideration immediately following the consent agenda. Commissioners, is there any questions about anything on the consent agenda?
And I just want to point out, F, professional services, and I guess you're going to serve on it, Seco Park improvements. I've been getting emails for weeks about what are we going to do with Seco Park. Well, that's the plan. The money's on hand from that quality of life sales tax, and Seco Park will be renovated.
So I will be the commissioner representative on the selection committee for that one. Who would like to be on the committee for the Parks Master Plan? Okay. Linda will do the F2 Comprehensive Parks and Rec Master Plan Request for Qualifications Committee. All right. I will throw it open to public comment on items that are on the consent agenda only. You'll have up to 5 minutes. We'll take your comments under advisement, but will not respond to questions or comment on anything you have to say right away. Anybody want to comment on any consent agenda items? State your name, sign in first, address, state your name, where you live, or why. Oh, I need to get you some power here, maybe.
We good? There we go. I'll start us out positive. My name is Carla Hagemeister, and I am the Executive Director of the Flint Hills Breadbasket. And I'm here tonight to say thank you. I'm very excited for the parking lot project that is on the consent agenda this evening. I want to share with you all something that many of the city staff probably really already know, and many of you already know as well, that the Douglas Recreation Center is a very busy place. The Flint Hills Breadbasket is a very busy place. And the parking improvements in that location is just going to be, I don't know that game-changing is necessarily the appropriate word, but that's what comes to mind. Having clear signage, having clear line markings, having more parking, having parking that is, having a parking lot that is just nice and level is going to be a great improvement for us. You guys know, or I guess I can share from my perspective of being at the Breadbasket every day, that the Douglas Recreation Center is a very busy place. And we are now a very busy place, and we're sharing that space, and we're sharing it really well. We enjoy our time, and we're working together very well. But it is a much-needed improvement, and it's much appreciated. I appreciate the work from Wyatt before he transitioned, and from Alfonso, and from Christine here at the city staff level. They've done a great job. And just to give you guys an idea, since I'm up here, about how busy we are, I left today. We're open twice on Tuesdays, and when I left 10 minutes before this meeting started, we had served 133 households today. Last week, during that week time period, we served 415 households, with 44 of them being new. In the month of May, we served 141 households. That's not duplicated, that's independent households, with 154 of those being new. And year-to-date, from January 1 until today, we have served 1,551 households, representing 4,504 people, unduplicated. So that doesn't count that they've come more than once. That's if they've come to us at least one time, and 807 new families. So we are incredibly grateful to have that improvement in our parking lot, and we know that it will help us serve the community better. It will help the Douglas Recreation Center and the Douglas Annex. All of those things operate better, and I'm really excited to see that happen, and I want to say thank you. That's all I had.
All right, you're welcome.
Just to say thank you, Carla. I'm sure our staff and administration appreciate your support, and because I think it's a good thing for both the city and the breadbasket in that area. How many new parking places are there going to be?
I don't know, but it's enough to make me excited.
Okay.
I'm excited for lines. Let's go with
Just
that.
put some
I'm
lines.
just excited for clear parking lines. So
And there are no
it's great.
lines.
I'm excited for that, and thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
sure.
I'm going back to work.
Okay.
That's $400,000 we ever spent. Okay, anybody else want to comment on something on the consent agenda? All right, we'll close the comment on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hassel.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
All righty, we will move into the public hearing on the industrial revenue bonds for a speculative building. Jared, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. This is our first ever consideration of a speculative industrial building IRB through the program that you all adopted actually almost a couple of years ago now, where we have an applicant who is seeking an IRB and tax abatement to build this building that I'm going to describe to you today. I do want to, before we jump into the specific application, just give you a little bit of background on the policy, since it has been a few months since this was considered by the City Commission, but then go into the IRB and the Economic Development Tax Abatement Agreement that's going to be considered for you all tonight. And then we can hold that public hearing and you all can consider it. But back in October of 2021, you all adopted a policy resolution related to this speculative industrial building IRB program. This was requested by our Chamber of Commerce to establish this kind of unique tax abatement program where developers would come into our community willing to construct a facility on a speculative basis without any pre-lease in place, and that was in order to allow for prospects who are looking into the Manhattan community where space would be readily available and competitors may be offering similar things. We've also heard feedback from the community that while there may be some older, vacant commercial or industrial facilities, those are difficult to retrofit and can often be too cost prohibitive for some of those. So we mirrored the Wichita policy, who's had a successful program in this area, and you all passed it in October, and this is the first application that we've received. And I won't go into too much details of the actual policy because the application and the agreement that you're considering tonight mirrors that pretty well exactly. So This is the site under consideration, just for reference. This is the lot 2 of this McCall pattern PUD, just north of McCall Road here in Pottawatomie County, within Manhattan city limits. And the applicant proposes to develop over 100,000 square foot speculative industrial building here. So this applicant has applied and said that they will follow the criteria set forth in the policy. So the ED agreement that allows for this to occur outlines most of these criteria and the provisions that are required. It's got to be a minimum size of 50,000 square feet of usable industrial space. As I mentioned, it's over 100,000 square foot building that they're proposing. It has minimum clear heights of 28 feet and minimum clear spans of 30 feet to allow for that industrial use. And they've agreed that the primary or the first lease within this structure is going to be at a minimum of 25,000 square feet of use in that space. And the applicant has indicated that they're anticipating a primary lease higher than that, in the range of 30 to 50,000 square feet. The agreement also outlines many other provisions within the spec building program. Of course, as I mentioned and showed you the map of where it's located within the city of Manhattan. The applicant does not have any pre-leasing agreements in place for this building. So the intent is that the group would build it and then be able to pursue location of businesses into this building. It will meet the identified uses that we've outlined in the policy: manufacturing, research and development, production, warehousing. Warehousing and storage is the primary use that they're intending, but they do want to have the flexibility to use some of these other industrial uses, so we did make that broader in the agreement. Upon completion, they would start construction within upon completion of the agreement, they would start construction within 120 days of issuance of a building permit, and then it would take up to 15 months for the construction to be complete. There is also a provision within there that the applicant cannot lease space to an existing business located within Manhattan city limits. So again, the intent is to bring in economic development from outside of the community. And there is a provision in there that in the event 5, 6, 7 years down the road, a transfer of the real estate did occur, this economic development agreement and the tax abatement would not transfer with the owner. That new owner would need to come before you all to continue that abatement if they so choose. One of the many reasons we have these economic development projects seek IRBs is the ability. An IRB is allowed an economic development tool through the state of Kansas that allows a sales tax exemption on construction materials during that construction process, so they would be pursuing that. And then they would be pursuing the tax abatement, which is allowed also through the issuance of industrial revenue bonds on this project. As outlined in the policy, it mirrors that following completion of the speculative building, for years 1 through 5, it would be a 95% tax abatement on the building and the land. And for years 6 through 10, it would be a 50% tax abatement if 50% of that industrial building is leased. In the event in a given year that 50% is less than 50% is leased, so anywhere from 0 to 50, they would not be able to receive the property tax abatement, that 50% abatement for that year. However, the following year, they could receive that abatement in years after that in the event that they meet that 50% threshold. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you all. And if not, we can allow the public hearing to occur and hear any thoughts from the applicant.
Commissioners, any questions for Jared?
I do have a question. Is this the kind of thing that the owner can continue to get abatements indefinitely? Or, I know it's gonna end in 10 years because that's what we're approving tonight. Can they come back and get continuing abatements? Or is there, depending on the commission at the time, we're not approving perpetual tax
No,
abatement, right?
my understanding is that the abatement would be through the life of the IRB, which is 10 years.
10
So they would have, that tax abatement is tied to the IRB.
Okay. So, can they?
Jared, If I
And
can-
Sarah Steele with Gilmore and Bell, our bond counsel, is on, and she'd be happy to explain it better than I can.
Good.
you explained it very well, but I'll just add that the only way that they could apply to extend any sort of an abatement beyond 10 years is only if they sell the property to an unrelated entity and the commission at the time determines that that is a benefit that they want to give to the new owner. So this current owner, this group, will not be able to extend any property tax abatement beyond the 10-year period.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah?
We just have to live long enough, right? Okay.
All right, anything else right now? We'll have time later for more questions, but does the applicant want to provide any extra information, or did he tell it pretty right? We're good? Okay, we'll move on to the public hearing then. I now open the public hearing. Remember, nobody signed up in advance, but if you haven't already signed up, which you didn't, please be sure to sign in at the front counter here, and you can have up to 5 minutes to speak. Only speak one time, and you must stop when the timer sounds. We will not answer questions or debate you, but we'll take your comments under advisement. Anybody want to comment on this item?
Good evening, Commissioners. Darren Solden, 930 Claflin, Director of Economic Development for the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. And just want to spend a minute to note that, as Jared mentioned, this is a program that the Chamber helped lead the development of and bring before you a couple years ago. And this particular project, I believe, fits exactly what the intent of the program was, and that was to help create contemporary space usable for industrial purposes, job-creating activity, ultimately sales tax or property tax revenue generating activity within the community. And as we look across the spectrum of economic development projects and prospects we work on, over half of those searches begin with a search for an existing building. And so this helps from a competitive standpoint when it comes to economic development in the community and in the region, and believe this project is a perfect example of the type of thing that was envisioned when this proposal and ultimately this program was brought to the table. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Darren. Anybody else here to comment on speculative building, IRB, and tax abatement?
Do you have more in the pipeline, Darren, or is this just the first and nobody else yet?
We have had interest, and there's been folks have reached out both to the city and to the chamber looking at building speculative industrial space, yes.
So it is
All they need is some land.
it's a valuable commodity. All right.
So, all right, nobody else, so we will close the public hearing for this. And is there any other questions for staff or the applicant?
I would just mention that Jack Alston from the Pottawatomie County Economic Development Group wrote a letter of support for this. It was very encouraging, and anyway, just thought it was important that the Economic Development Group next door thought it was important too, so in addition to our chamber.
All right.
No question, just this is what we talked about. What we wanted to do was to get a spec building program up and going. This fits with that. We were told also that we probably lost out or have lost out on some deals because we haven't had them before. So strong support to get this going.
Would you like to make a motion in that case?
I'd be glad to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I move, is the motion on the, Can I use that?
There you go.
Okay. I move that we approve resolution number 062023-C, authorizing the issuance of $10 million in industrial revenue bonds and a property tax abatement for Flint Hills Ventures LLC, and authorize city administration to finalize and the mayor and the city clerk to execute an economic development agreement and payment in lieu of taxes agreement, or also called pilot, with Flint Hills Ventures LLC.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Mayor Hassel?
Yes.
Commissioner Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Very good. We'll move into the general agenda and start with the reconsideration of the rezoning of 407 Pottawatomie Avenue. Stephanie Peterson.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor, Stephanie Peterson, Director of Community Development. Back before you this evening is the rezoning request for 407 Pottawatomie Avenue. Again, that was from RL Single Family Residential District to BC Business Commercial District. Just a reminder of the site and its location. I put together a brief timeline so we could kind of track how this item has gone back and forth between yourself and the Planning Board. At the May 25th Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board meeting, the motion to approve the rezoning tied with a 3-3 vote. Because it resulted in a tie, the motion failed, and so a recommendation came to you to deny the rezoning. On June 6th, the first reading of an ordinance came to the City Commission, and you all voted to return the item back to the Planning Board. To reconsider review factor number 5, compatibility of the proposed zoning district with the nearby property. On June 8th, the Planning Board took no action to add this item to their agenda. Per state statute, the inaction on the part of the Planning Board is a resubmission of its original recommendation, so denial of the rezoning request. And that brings us to this evening, where the item returns to you for action. You have two options before you this evening for proceeding on this item. First, you could adopt the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board's recommendation and deny the rezoning request by a simple majority vote, or you could override the Planning Board's recommendation and approve the rezoning request by a simple majority vote as well. I did include here the original findings, should we want to look at that. I also have hidden, but I can bring them up, any of the slides from the original presentation. I wasn't going to go through those again unless there was a specific question that anyone had. So with that, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, nothing apparently.
I do have some, just some questions. I couldn't find the delineation on the map for the floodplain zone, flood zones, and I know it's referenced in the materials, but I wasn't sure where those were.
This would be protected by the levee, so it would
Yeah.
not be in any of the
So there are
floodplain.
no lines through this property?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And I think I mentioned this before, but I'm not clear where this southeast park is. And I know that you referenced it in the last meeting, but it's, I just would like that clarified.
So this area here is Southeast Park on the other
Everything
side of the
in the
levee.
bold yellow.
And I believe it even extends down here. This is all city-owned property.
And is it good for anything as far as park-wise unless you want to go
There's
spelunking or something in there? So.
there are some trails that are on there. They're not paved. They're more mountain biking trails that have been, I think it was a volunteer group that put those in a while back. So that's what I think it's primarily known for.
And it's on the other side of the levee. It's on the water side of the
Correct.
levee.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the area that I believe the riverfront group has interest in, is the
No,
area on the other side.
Yeah. I support the riverfront development. I just am never clear where the lines are for this park. Okay, so, and I wondered where on your drawing are the two the stormwater detention ponds that were referenced? Because I don't see them in the
Oh, Rob
in the
left.
map at all.
You know that by chance? Oh, I think it was, let me go back. So if it was part of the parking lot, there was an easement that was purchased, and I believe it was along here. Maybe the property owner could speak to this a little bit better, but I think that we purchased some area in here for stormwater.
On the east side, huh?
I believe so.
Okay, not up against the levee. Okay, I would be interested in knowing the answer to that. Okay, thank you for now.
Does the applicant want to address that or any other, provide any other information?
Am I good?
I think you're good, thanks.
Again, thank you, Commissioners, for taking this up again. I'm Chris Eichmann with Midwest Concrete Materials, and as I spoke last time, we're intending to build a training facility for our employees, and I suppose I would just, if you have any questions that maybe we didn't get covered last time or that have come up.
So what's the deal with that easement and ponds? Anybody know anything about what they were talking about there?
There's not
there's
a
no-
pond, but we gave the city an easement.
So the city can do what they need to with, to
Tie in
address
into the-
anything with the
didn't they-
levee and that.
Didn't they come across the levee? Or come under the levee or something?
I don't know.
Rob and Brian
I
aren't
can't-
here, but
So there's a new gate well structure.
Yeah.
Just to the bottom right of where that yellow line is, just to the right of that, you can kind of see that inlet. And that came from the big storm sewer project more recently that came from the 9th Street, clear up on Points and came down that area. I'm not sure what the detention structures, the south of Southeast Park, those are the old borrow pits for the original levee construction, so that have now regrown with timber. So those are why they're in the city's name. So they're kind of like a detention pond, but it's on the river side of the levee.
Okay. So you're not worried about any kind of rainwater issue thing on that piece of land there?
we'll have to do our on-site retention for our
analysis
own
thing.
property and
Okay. All right, Linda, is that,
I was just referring to this sentence. A permanent easement was taken by the city over the southern portion of the site and reserved for ponding of water during a flood event.
okay.
So that's what I was
Okay,
asking.
Ponding is different than
Yeah.
ponds, that we're planning on
Well,
having ponds.
okay.
Okay. The water will accumulate there for a while, and then it'll be gone.
Okay.
Is, I think,
Yeah.
kind of the definition of ponding, more or less, so. Okay, any questions for Mr. Eichmann? Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Because all this was hashed out in pretty good detail multiple times between the planning board and here, I'd like to see if we could limit public comment to 15 minutes or 3 minutes a person. Just, I don't think there's anything much new to be said that we haven't heard. Anybody?
But I think this is a zoning issue, and we do have a policy about,
Well, we can have public comment,
Public
we're just not gonna
comments.
make an hour's worth of it, rehash the same things we all heard 2 weeks ago.
I'm interested in what the public has to say.
Well, I am too, on a shortened basis of new information that they didn't tell us last time. So I would move that we would limit public comment to 3 minutes per person and be done by 6:45. That's a motion.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to limit the discussion, public comment to 15 minutes and 3 minutes per person. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Morse,
No.
Mayor Hassel,
Yes?
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
motion carried 3-1.
All right, so we'll open public comment, talk fast, try to tell us something you didn't tell us 2 weeks ago if you can. Just sum up and sign in, tell us your name quickly, and whatever public comment you would like to tell us.
On May 3rd, 2021, the MCM first attempted to change the zoning to LMSC at the 407 Drive. This attempt failed 6-1. The main reason the vote failed was because of the domino effect. The neighbors don't want to lose their land. 2 years later, the MCM tried to change it to BC. The again failed. For the first attempt and the second try, the neighborhood has been united to stop the zoning change. I was the only neighbor to receive information of the change, but with a few phone calls, all the neighbors were united to stop the change. The biggest concern was the domino effect, that once MCM got the okay to change the zoning, they would keep pushing neighborhood out. You have an out-of-town business that claims to be a great neighbor because they mow the grass. If you go along Fort Riley Boulevard, it's not mowed. You have 7 families who live in the city, who vote in the city, who have 50-year precedent of Pottawatomie being residential on the south, business on the north. It's worked for 50 years. And nothing has been an issue. Now, MCM goes in, buys property, they turn around, demo the house, then go for a zoning change. That's backwards. It should have been addressed first. On May 6th, I had a meeting with Mr. Eichmann. With the interest of purchasing the property, he'd give him a way out to say that Temple Lane could be a new line. They won't stop. You all know they won't stop. A buffer is a weak word. A buffer is beautiful. A building is not a buffer. Across Temple Lane, they're not going to stop. They've already worked on getting the property in front of the 431. They already have an option on the 404 property right across the street. So why do they need all this property, all this land? They're too small. This area is too small. It's not fit for MCM down there. You have a neighborhood who does not want this. You are all elected officials. We all vote for you. But yet, an out-of-town business, they say they're local. They're not. They have businesses all over the state. That doesn't make them a local business. And to shut our time down, give us limited time to discuss this is very unfair. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Anybody else care to comment?
Well, of course, we all practice this for 5 minutes, so I'll do my best to get my good points in.
Thank you.
We all care a lot about this, and that's why we keep coming back for this. So I am back to discuss the rezoning of 407 Pottawatomie today and the negative impacts that it's not only going to have on the neighborhood, but the community of Manhattan and our trust in this city commission to uphold policy, which has already been taken away from us this evening. So imagine how we're feeling about the possibility of the rezone. I'm going to have to skip a lot of this. I did want to say that I heard from many of you talking about this location being undesirable. And I just want you to remember that the decision that you're making tonight isn't about if you want to live there. It's about the dozens of people showing up time and time again to tell you that they do, and they don't want their neighborhood taken away. Good leaders know that in every issue, certain stakeholders' views and opinions are weighed heavier than others because they are affected the most. And I really appreciate Mr. Wynn Butler siding with the community, and we know that you saw the balcony view because we know you're not sure that this is a good idea. But he sees the neighbors coming time and time again as something really important, standing out, and as it should. And he can relate to this, so he was able to really listen to us and not have a predetermined idea of how he was going to vote. And I really hope that the whole commission takes this stance. Make your decision based off of policy and good leadership, not your personal preferences. MCM doesn't care about that neighborhood. They'll say they do because it got your interest, right? But beautification by tearing down houses and huge trees that were planted along that property line to be a home for people by the original homeowner and his young daughter, that's not beautification for the people who are actually in that neighborhood. So let's be transparent. The land being rezoned isn't about beautification. It's not about being a good neighbor. It's about furthering MCM's growth. And that's great for their company to be growing, not by tearing down our houses and our neighborhoods. Like my father said, that has been a 50-year policy, and it was there for a reason, so people could live and work safely and happily. But now, if we don't recognize that them taking over my great-grandmother's front lot is just speaking to the domino effect, then I can't even understand where your mindset is at. And It was shown that 3 people were interested in that land before MCM bought it. I personally know them, but that was before Mrs. Little had dementia, and when she moved to a nursing home, her family sold it for $92,000 instead of $80 or $48. So why was MCM so happy to pay so much more? Why does MCM want the front lots? So they can keep going, because that is their future plan. I really hope your future plan supports the people who vote you in and the community and the people who actually live in it. So I urge you to deny the rezoning request and uphold policy.
What's your
It's
name?
there for a reason.
What's your name is?
Stephanie Sewell.
Got it. Thank you. All right, next. State your name and address and
Connor Knightley, and it's 506 Colorado Street, just a few blocks away.
go ahead and start talking. Your clock started. You can sign in later.
Okay, sorry, yeah, okay. I'm gonna have just a couple of brief comments, and it's mostly just about the fact that residential access and housing access is a huge concern of the community, all over the place. And that includes this spot, and taking the priorities of MCM over the citizens of Manhattan is not something that should be considered. People need places to live. We have a housing shortage, affordable housing shortage, and this is a ill-informed policy where you're basically, if you vote for this, taking the priorities of a business that is not from Manhattan over the residents of Manhattan. And so, yeah, I find it not greatly appealing. But that's all I have to say. I'll finish signing in.
Okay. You can start talking on the right microphone and then sign out on the front of the.
Charlene Sargent, 1800 West Bank Way. I would like to ask MCM, what is their 10-year plan? Are they going to keep making offers to the neighborhood families until one by one they get an offer they can't refuse, they give in, they sell out, there goes the neighborhood? Does MCM plan to take over the south side of Pottawatomie, clear over to Juliet Avenue? If MCM needs more space, maybe the company should move to another location. I would think it rather awkward of their trucks traveling up and down this road as it is. They already have to go down to another street to cross the railroad. But before we get to any of that, it's my understanding that spot zoning is illegal in Kansas. You can't just rezone one lot or two. The whole section or that whole area has to be rezoned at the same time in accordance with your comprehensive plan. That seems to me that would make both this and the next agenda item a foregone conclusion, that the rezoning attempts of these are just out of the question. Spot zoning is illegal in the state of Kansas. You can't take one lot out and rezone it. You have to rezone that whole area. Is that what you want to do and tear out this historic neighborhood? I encourage you to follow the directives that you've been given in the land use planning, follow what the planning board has recommended or not approved of, as the case may be, but to follow the directives you've been given and not let somebody chip away at our zoning. We have zoning so that you don't have somebody buy a lot in Sharingbrook and put up a car repair place. It's inappropriate. So let's follow the directives you've been given and not allow something illegal like spot zoning.
All right, thank you. Got time for two more?
Hi. My husband and I are going to share our time because I've timed my speech down to 5 minutes. So tonight's meeting, my name is Elaine Moore and I live at 800 South Juliet. And tonight's meeting is some kind of record, I think. This is our, unlike the other tally, this is the 7th official meeting for the rezoning of 407 Pottawatomie. This whole rezoning feels like a David and Goliath story situation for us because we have a multi-million-dollar business for whom rezoning is no big deal. The zoning laws are kind of like suggestions, and they can easily be changed with a good lawyer. On the other hand, for us, we take zoning laws seriously because that's all we have to protect our homes. We've never really been acknowledged by city staff, only in passing, that this rezoning will have no effect on our neighborhood. We've never been acknowledged by MCM except as a barrier to their westward expansion. We feel like our neighborhood has been written off because we don't look like other neighborhoods. We have our houses all on one side of the street. Why haven't we been shown the same respect and understanding as, say, the next neighborhood that's on the other side of town? Is it possible that some of the commissioners might have biases or prejudices that inform their judgment? When you say, for example, that you don't think the lot is suitable for residential, it implies that the rest of our neighborhood is not suitable for residential because we're right next to this lot. And as my late mother-in-law would have said, who died and left you in charge? That's supposed to be a joke. And why is it that city commissioners get to decide what's suitable for residential? Let the market decide what's suitable. This rezoning has been offered as a compromise. The definition of a compromise is when two parties both make concessions in order to come to an agreement. We've been asked to give up part of our neighborhood, and MCM has been asked to give up nothing. They get the zoning they want, they get the building, and they get the parking lot they want. And that doesn't meet the definition of a compromise. It was 30 years ago when we met upstairs here at a city commission meeting. We were being annexed into the city of Manhattan, and Eugene Klingler, one of the commissioners, disagreed with annexing us at a single-family residential zoning because he felt like our neighborhood was in decline. And it didn't warrant that designation. But in the spirit of compromise, he relented. And 30 years later, my husband will finish this.
All right.
I can't.
Okay. Well,
Could
he can come up next here. Go ahead and, Jason.
He's almost done.
Okay, talk fast.
He's almost done.
We'll start.
Robert Moore, same address, 800. 30 years later, the neighborhood looks the same, if not better. The big difference is that 2 new homes have been added. No one invests in new homes in an area of decline. The good doctor turned out to be wrong, as have others who have underestimated our neighborhood. This is such a unique area of Manhattan with a rich history. There's no other place like it in Manhattan. And we ask that with your help in preserving it by denying this rezoning, accepting the recommendation of the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jason, come on up. And this will be the last speaker tonight for this.
Thank you, Commissioners. I promise to be fast. We submitted a letter of support. Obviously, you've seen that. I've changed my comments a little bit just based on some of the things I've heard. Obviously, the Chamber is an organization of 950 businesses. Those 950 businesses represent about 3,000 people. A lot of those are Manhattan voters committed to growing the community, and we believe that part of that is allowing businesses to grow and prosper, and we spend a lot of time doing that, as you heard, based on the last initiative on the spec building program. I first want to address this idea of MCM being out-of-town business. We do not believe that. We think MCM is a great corporate citizen of Manhattan. In fact, they were our Business of the Year last year for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is they committed a lot of resources without promise of repayment to help us get Scorpion. And look, I'm not here to sing the praise of MCM. We all, they can do that themselves, but they are a local business. They employ a lot of people, and we appreciate their investment here, and we appreciate their continued investment here and hope they continue to do so. one of the challenges we have on a regular basis is understanding the community's dynamics and whether we are open to business and business growth. We, of course, defend that on a regular basis and believe that Manhattan is a pro-business community, and we advocate on that behalf. Part of that is creating an environment where businesses can grow. I understand the neighborhood concerns. As I look at the map, I see commercial zoning on two sides of that. So it's, to use the Sharingbrook example, I don't think you see commercial zoning on two sides of a Sharingbrook rezone, but obviously that's your decision. At the end of the day, we strongly believe that in order for Manhattan to prosper and for things like parks and recreation to continue to prosper and other community services, we have to be a community that allows businesses to grow. I'm just saying that as a broad term, and again, representing 950 community businesses and around 2,500 people who are employed by those businesses and own those small businesses. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Nope, thank you. All right, that's after 6:45, so the public comment period is now closed. Commissioners, do you have any more questions for the applicant or for staff?
Yeah, I just have one for the staff. It was mentioned, this is an illegal spot zoning, and my understanding is that's not correct, at least from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, Stephanie covered that actually at the last meeting, and I'd ask her to also comment this meeting, and Katie, feel free to chime in anytime you'd like.
Correct, that would not be considered a spot zoning. Part of what our future land use map shows and what it references even in the comprehensive plan, that this is not, when we put our future land use map layers over parcels, it is not supposed to be parcel by parcel. It does not draw a distinct line. It just more shows the general pattern of development. To give you an example, Sharingbrook's been brought up a couple of times. If we decided to put rezone a parcel in the middle of that subdivision as commercial, industrial, that is the perfect example of spot zoning.
Yeah, I just want to be sure it was clarified for the public, because, sometimes misinformation gets proliferated.
Well, I might point out that on the map from the land use plan, this parcel is definitely in the yellow zone. It's not in the industrial. So it's reasonable to assume that it should be not, or it should be residential. So it's not a misconception that people reading this would not come to. I mean, the planning board did it, the neighborhood looks at it that way, and you're telling us, oh, don't pay attention that that's yellow. That's what I'm saying.
I think that's where, before we had GIS and we were able to be very precise with zoning districts or with future land use map, we anticipated that there might be some confusion. So that's where in the written portion of, it's chapter 3, page 22 of our comprehensive plan, we actually talk about the future land use map and how it is to be used, and that is supposed to be more of a broad brush stroke versus parcel by parcel. So even though that's shown on the map as yellow, it recognizes that there could be that transition between a residential and a commercial use. There's other items in the comprehensive plan that actually talk about the compatibility of certain commercial districts with a residential district. So all of those factors is what our team had used to put together the staff report that went before the planning board and evaluated the comprehensive plan and its compatibility with that.
I appreciate you addressing that. I also found on page 7 of the staff report, I don't know whose it is, let's see, it's after the map with the comp plan. It talks that there was a drainage study conducted, and that's what I was getting at earlier, and I didn't find that particular site in the middle of the page. With respect to draining, the report indicates that stormwater detentions will be accomplished through a series of on-site detention ponds. Okay. I didn't make it up. The ponds will discharge to the ponding area that runs along the south side of the property. The study concludes that proposed detention will reduce release rates to less than pre-existing conditions, which is the 2, 10, and 100-year storm events. So I was asking, where are the ponds going to be? That was my,
I did look that up. It's right along the south side of the property line.
right up against the levees then?
Yep.
Okay,
And that was what, that was part of the kind of the preliminary work before the levee project started.
okay,
And that was part of why we needed the easement.
okay. Thank you, I appreciate the explanation. About the planning boards, turning it down, turning the proposal down, twice, in essence. What explanation do you have, Stephanie? I mean, that's, one of the things we look to is the planning board's review and decision. And so I'm asking, what is it that you believe why we should override the planning board in this instance?
So I can speak to the findings so that I don't misrepresent what their intentions were. The findings that the planning board cited were the existing use of the property, its physical environmental characteristics, its zoning history, and its suitability for the uses currently restricted to. So I think that what they were speaking to there is that it is currently suitable to remain as a residential use. The second one was conformity of the proposed change with the comprehensive plan. I think we just went through that, of understanding the future land use map and then how the comprehensive plan weighs into that factor. And then the last one was compatibility of the proposed zoning district with nearby property. Again, looking at the residential property to the west and then and I guess giving more weight to that versus the commercial industrial uses that are abutting the other two sides. There was actually a correction made at the planning board meeting. One of the planning board representatives altered the minutes, or asked the minutes to be altered to reflect that she had actually pointed out factor number 4 as well, which is the character of the neighborhood, including the zoning and uses of nearby property. Kind of a duplicate of one of those other factors. But again, staff spends quite a bit of time evaluating those and analyzing those and putting together the staff report to really try to weigh all elements and aspects of a rezoning request.
Thanks.
Anything else, Linda?
No, I just wanted to get at some of those core issues because they're the basis upon which the planning board made their decision. And basically, the second time said, no, we made our decision. We're not going to look at it again. None of us would change our vote. So to me, that's a pretty firm decision by the planning board.
But it was 3-3, so it's not like it was voted down completely. It was a split, and because there wasn't after affirmative yes vote of 4-3, it failed by virtue of
because it tied.
So it wasn't like that's not like nobody thought it was a good idea.
No.
So
It also speaks to the need for board members to be present, because there were different board members present and different mix each meeting. Well, I had just, I don't know that I have any more questions. I wanted to know about the stormwater detention and the permanent easement and the 500-foot critical zone line from the levee. It's just hard for us to look at this map and see these references that are. So when we're going to use one of these references, I'd like to be able to see what you're talking about when I look at a map. So I don't misspeak or have to be so detailed, because I'm not always that detailed.
okay, anybody else? I was going to say, part of being a commissioner is balancing priorities and interests, and where there's the residential, the neighbors and the people who are more interested in maintaining a residential area have to be balanced with potential growth and jobs and safety of their truck drivers out there on the highways. But my thing is nobody wanted to live in that house that was torn down, apparently, which is why it was torn down. And I'm sorry, Scott, but nobody's been living in that house across the street there either, and I'm hoping you do fix it up because it's nice. But there's a huge big lot there that somebody could potentially put some housing on out front there. And so we're not like eliminating all options for housing in the area. But yeah, it's been bought by MCM, and either they will store crud on there because they've got the land and they've got crud to store, or they will build a building that will be of benefit to them. And then hopefully it's not going to be, only people, there's not even going to be anybody within 100 yards probably that's going to even see it. 50 yards, 50 or 60 yards to even see that building on a regular basis. And there's, and people down on South Juliet, you're 3 blocks away, and you've got a clock repair business in that neighborhood already, so it's not like there's no businesses, and Hummel's across the street, and so there's a lot of commercial activity in that area. So I think based on the fact that it's east of Temple, it's sort of an island of its own out there, and so I don't really see any reason not to go ahead and let them do something more productive with that land, since its uses as a residential lot came and went when the house went into deterioration so much that it wasn't salvageable or by anybody that was interested. So anybody else want to comment? Or?
Yeah, I was kind of going through, and Linda was going through her points we were getting what the planning board did, and, you know, conformity with the area, character of the neighborhood, compatible with nearby. Given all the industrial that's there, it seems like we meet all of those things. Now, is it still suitable for what it was before? You can make the argument it's still suitable, I suppose, and I don't think the area is undesirable. I think the area has challenges because you do have the industrial that's close by. And I think that area, that particular lot, has more challenges because of how it's sandwiched in there and has industrial, you know, I know there's the parking lot and stuff on that one side, but really kind of all around it. And I have to be on the radio with Ron today and mention about some safety concerns if we turn that into residential, especially with children and such, that's to me the high point of where you're going to have the most traffic and everything going by. Now, someone could say, well, the lot next to it's going to have a lot too. Sure, but not quite as much as that one being sandwiched in that area. And I think, you know, that Temple makes a good boundary line there for which to do it. Mark brought up, you know, no one else wanted the property. It hasn't been like that's been a big investment area. My understanding is when it did come up, it was MCM and Howie's that put bids in on it, and MCM, you know, won out on that. So to say that building is going to deteriorate the neighborhood as opposed to a vacant, you know, storage lot, because it does belong to MCM, I trust that, you know, they're going to put in a nice building, it's going to have nice landscaping, and it's, at least from what's been described, and yes, that could always change, but it's not going to be operating all night long or providing a lot of noise within that neighborhood. So I think it, you know, checks off all the boxes. I do appreciate the neighborhood and their responses, and I can, you know, understand it, but, you know, this is one of the decisions we need to make.
All right. Well, I would move that we override the.
I
got some more
think each
comments?
member of the commission needs to speak to the issues so that this is a zoning issue, and there are valid points. I respect the planning board's work, and it isn't easy for me to consider overriding them or whatever we have to do. This lot is a kind of on a boundary for me, and I think it belongs more with the industrial area than the residential area. I would just say that I don't think it should go west of Temple into the residential area. And I would like an explanation sometime about the MCM purchase of the front part of the lot to the west. And I told him I was going to ask that. I did have a conversation with Chris Eichmann on the phone before the last meeting and before this. just, he asked me if I had any questions, and that was my question. Well, why did you buy that? And so, anyway, I do think that a nice-looking building that's landscaped would be better than the house that was there and better than the vacant lot that we see now. I'm not sure that that many people would want to build a house there with the noise that you've talked about, the trucks rumbling by. But I would like to explore the idea, or the city to explore the idea of bringing the truck traffic in from the north on like 4th Street or 5th Street, rather than running them down Pottawatomie Avenue, which is a problem for the neighborhood and the noise and irritation. If we could do that, it would be, would seem to me, be easier on the neighborhood. I am not interested in spot zoning, so this better not be spot zoning. And you know, with the loosey-goosey interpretation of the land use plan, you can't hold that plan to any lot, it would seem to me, if this one can't be held to a standard. So given the city administration, I assume legal interpretation, I'm going to support the proposal, but I'll be down here. You know, I'm not running again for office, so I'll be here if we ever try to go across Temple. But, and I would like, you know, to have an explanation about, because we haven't heard anything about the purchase, because, you know, the storyline was okay until I realized that the lot to the west was in play. So, anyway.
But we really can't take that into consideration because it's not part of the rezoning this evening. So, but it'd be nice to have, but it's really.
Shows intent, yeah.
Potentially. All right, anything, Wynn, or should I go ahead?
No, I just reiterate what I said last time. I mean, in 2011, I said, you know, when it comes to rezoning, the owners that own the property adjacent trump everybody else. And so I'm not gonna go back on that. I said that in 2011. That's just a general fundamental philosophy I have on property rights. But then also, I agree with the chamber, but we don't want to be a bad business community. I personally think that, you know, that building is probably much better than the one that was there before that got demolished. And so basically, you know, the fault here is that somebody did a bad salesmanship job, you know, on that building and stuff to the neighbors, because it just didn't come across. So I'm going to vote the same way I did last time.
All right, I'll go ahead and move that we override the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board and adopt first reading of an ordinance rezoning 407 Pottawatomie Avenue from RL Low Density Residential to BC Business Commercial District based on the findings in the staff report. Is there a second?
You'll have to.
Second.
All right, go ahead and call the roll there.
Mayor Hassel,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
No.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-1.
All righty, we will move on to item B, which is rezoning the Kaiser Edition, lots 1 and 2 on Browning Avenue from low-density residential to RLA low-density residential attached district.
Good evening again. The next item for you is the rezoning request for lots 1 and 2 of Kaiser Edition, where the applicant is seeking to rezone 2 lots to RLA single-family attached residential district from RL single-family detached. The 2 lots are located immediately east of Browning Avenue and north of Kimball. As you can see from this aerial, most of the homes on the east side of Browning are single-family detached dwellings, and across the street are 42 duplexes for a total of 84 units. In 2015, the house that formerly occupied the tract was condemned and vacated as an unsafe structure. It was ultimately demolished in 2018 and then later replatted to the 2-lot subdivision, lots 1 and 2 of Kaiser Edition, as you see here. Over the past 5 years, the property has remained undeveloped. The applicant speculated in their application for rezoning that it is likely the layout of the lot, paired with the complexities of a drainage easement, shown down here in green, overhead power lines, which is this blue line, the whatever this color line is, orange, tan, this is the front yard setback as on the plat right now. So all of these were challenges in redeveloping that lot. The existing zoning is primarily RL, single-family residential, as well as a residential PUD that I spoke of earlier, immediately west of the site. Per the MDC, in its current zoning, this subject site could only be developed as 2 single-family detached units. So that would be 1 single-family house on each lot. The RLA district would allow for not only single-family detached, but a range of single-family attached dwellings, as you see here. Although the limitations of the site that I showed a couple slides earlier, including the easements and topography, would be limiting factors to some of these larger townhouse type of structures. Not to say that they couldn't make it work, but those are all going to be limiting in how this site can be developed. The future land use map located in the comprehensive plan identifies the subject property as low to medium density residential, which would allow for up to 11 dwelling units per acre. However, the bulk and lot standards that are in the MDC, they would only allow a maximum density of 9.3 acres. To provide context,
Not 9.3 acres.
Dwelling units per acre, apologies. To provide context, the PUD across the street is approximately 6 dwelling units per acre. Okay, again, the setbacks and easements will be a limiting factor in the number of units that can be accommodated on that site. Let me go back. One of the factors for consideration with rezonings is the adequacy of public facilities and services. In consulting with Public Works on that, the additional dwelling units that would be permitted under that RLA district can easily be accommodated by existing utilities and roadways. One additional note, and this is kind of just a random one, but I decided to throw it in right here. While a site plan and a specific product is often included with the application, which we received one that went to the planning board for this rezoning, we cannot conditionally rezone a property. So if a specific product is desired or we want to limit the use of a property, a planned development is the best route to achieve that desired outcome. Again, that's where I included the slide that showed what is currently permitted under the zoning and then what would be permitted outright. That means it would only take a building permit to proceed after it's rezoned. This did go before the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board at their May 25th meeting. The Planning Board voted 1-5 to recommend denying the rezoning, citing review factor number 5, compatibility of the proposed zoning district with nearby property. The Commission has 3 options for proceeding with this item this evening: to adopt the Planning Board's recommendation and deny the request by a simple majority vote, to override the Planning Board's recommendation and approve the rezoning request with a 2/3 majority vote, so 4 of you, or you could return the recommendation to the Planning Board for reconsideration. Again, you would have to provide a statement specifying the basis for returning that item, and since we've been through that scenario now once, we have much better guidance should you choose to go that route, and I'll probably defer to Katie to speak more to that, but we have a system now in place to make it a little bit cleaner than the previous one. With that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have of me.
Any questions for Stephanie?
Yeah, go back to one slide, compatibility
Oh, sorry.
of the proposed zoning district with the nearby property. Now, we do have duplexes in the nearby, but the zoning they're seeking allows you to do more than just that
Correct.
in there.
So with this
And-
right here.
Yeah. And then you have the PUD that's in there, but
Yep.
where we've got, have duplexes, but as I said, you can do more than duplexes. So, okay.
Any other questions of Stephanie?
Stephanie, is there a back access to this lot?
There is not. The only frontage and right-of-way access or adjacency is off of Browning.
And we aren't really able to consider the placement or the purpose. We either approve it or we don't.
Correct. So
If somebody said, want to put it on the front part of the lot and leave the back part open, that's not something we can consider.
not tonight with the rezoning. If there's no plating that needs to be done, that would be reviewed as part of the building permit process. So we do look at the MDC and the requirements of that, which would be limiting and where you could place a structure on this property and then how you also access it.
So one of the purposes of the MDC was to reduce the number of planned unit developments so that the developers had easier approval.
Correct. Planned unit developments, or planned developments as they're called with the MDC now, they are rather cumbersome and expensive. It's the plating and rezoning all kind of lumped into one. They are expensive for the applicant to do, but that also is to, as you mentioned, we don't want a lot of planned developments floating out there. So that's why that process is a little bit more of an undertaking.
It does permit the community to have more input, however.
It does. You could actually dictate the product, the placement of that, how much landscaping. Part of that's guided by the MDC, but there's a lot more, there's a better ability for the commission to weigh in on what they would like to see as part of that plan development.
So based on the fact that there's two lots there, if they put one on the north part and one on the south part, then it doesn't have to be replatted, but if they were gonna stick one to the back and one to the front on top of the property line, that would have to be replatted then.
Yes, that definitely would. And we have, if I go back, we have this overhead utility power lines, that it's a 20-foot utility easement. And then as you get to the back, there's some drainage and topography issues. The other issue of right now, there's just one shared driveway, curb cut right here. So they would have to work through that as well, of getting access to the back part of the lot.
Okay.
Do the overhead lines restrict what can be done on the back part of the lot? Or how does it restrict, if it restricts?
It could. You could put a driveway under here,
Yeah,
but as far
underneath
as any
them.
sort of structure,
Yeah.
you would not be able to place it underneath
Building, yeah.
that, yes.
But you could, a driveway, okay.
Yep,
Or
you could.
Or a shed, or maybe, I don't know,
Yeah, as long as you don't exceed the lot coverage.
no living unit.
Yep,
Okay.
Now, previously, there was one house on these two lots?
correct. So that was in 2015, I believe it was, is when that was. Let me go back to my notes real quick. Yeah, in 2015, the house that was there, it was condemned and vacated, and then it was ultimately demolished in 2018. And then at that time, it was replatted into what it is now. I think the applicant is here. I believe that was prior to them purchasing this property. I don't see, yeah, that was prior to them purchasing it when it was vacated, demolished, and then platted this way.
Is this the one that the city had to?
We had to go in
Yeah.
and condemn it,
And
yes.
condemn it, yeah, I remember that. Was that house on like the north half or the south half, or where was it?
In the middle, what?
In the middle?
In the
So-
middle.
So it sat on the lot line, okay.
Yes, so that used to just be one lot, and the house
Yeah,
kind of
that's what I-
straddled that line.
That's what I wondered, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Stephanie?
That owner said, nobody's moving in close to me, I'm gonna put my house in the middle. Okay.
All right, well, why don't we have the applicant come up and,
Sure. And he has a presentation, so I'm going to pull that up.
all right?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Tyler Holloman. I'm the applicant for this rezoning request. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge that
I fully recognize this is a little bit of an unconventional request, given the fact that I'm here is a little bit unconventional given the planning board's vote, so I know I have that to overcome. However, I do firmly believe that we have a really strong application here that does meet all 7 of the review criteria in the Manhattan Development Code's rezoning criteria. Additionally, I've spent the last several weeks meeting with the neighborhood, redesigning our proposed site plan, and completely redeveloping our intended market to address the concerns that were brought up during the planning board meeting. Thought I would start off just by giving you a quick background of the lot. So as Stephanie mentioned, it has been vacant since 2018. Home was demolished prior to that, and the house was deteriorated for many years prior. When we purchased it as 2 residential lots. As Stephanie mentioned, there is a significant development hurdles with this lot. There's a utility easement that bisects the lot north and south. There's a drainage easement to the south. The layout of the lot is extremely deep with no access from the backside, and what you can't really see from the pictures that have been shown yet is the lot slopes to the east significantly, so any development on the east half of the lot is going to be very, very difficult, and we've determined would not be feasible. We did originally look at this as a single-family home development to develop 2 single-family homes. As I'm sure you're aware, the cost to deliver a single-family home in this market is substantial. In our experience, that can reach $450,000 pretty easily. And consulting several local realtors and then doing a market study, we determined that use was just not an acceptable use for this location. The demand would just not be there for that level of house. Our original request was to go to RLA with a proposed site plan of 2 3-unit townhouses that would be held as rentals. As I'm sure, again, that you are aware, the housing market analysis indicates that we have a 440-unit shortfall in missing middle or workforce housing rental units, and so that was the original intended market of this development. As part of our rezoning process, we did hold a neighborhood meeting. We only had 2 households attend that meeting, and so a lot of the public comment that we heard during the planning board, we heard for the first time on the 25th. I went back and rewatched that meeting multiple times just to make sure that I had a good understanding of the public comment that was given in that meeting and the neighborhood concerns. And most of the speakers identified 2 issues with the proposal, the first being traffic. So I thought it would be important just to talk through the traffic numbers quickly. Browning currently serves an estimated 4,000 average daily trips. As it is zoned currently with 2 single-family homes, that would generate 20 average daily trips to Browning. That's what's currently allowed. Under our new proposal, our new proposed site plan, they would generate 24 average daily trips with 4 duplex units. So it's a net increase of 4 trips, or about a 1% impact on Browning. The additional and perhaps more significant concern that the neighborhood brought up was students. So as I mentioned, our original request, I had indicated that we were intending to hold these as rental units. That was significantly, was met with a lot of opposition with the neighborhoods. My company manages close to 1,000 rental units here in Manhattan. I firmly believe that this would not have been a student housing product. I believe that this would have been a workforce housing rental product that would deliver a inventory that does not exist very much in town. However, we did listen to the neighborhood concern, and we've revised that proposal to where these would now be individually deeded units that would be targeted as owner-occupied units. This design was based directly on findings in the housing market analysis for workforce housing by providing more missing middle housing. And I do want to point out that these are still single-family units. We are not proposing apartments. We are not proposing stacked units. They would be single-family attached housing units that would now be separately deeded and targeted for owner occupancy.
And you're planning 2 duplexes?
Yes. Okay. Yep. So the Planning Board, as you know, is supposed to review all rezoning requests based on 7 criteria. In my opinion, that did not happen, and that's probably my fault. During my presentation to the planning board, I presented a site plan, I presented several renderings and elevations of the proposal, and I presented a market study indicating that we would hold these as housing, rental housing units, and that consumed the rest of the meeting. I do want to point out that several members did indicate that they would be open to a duplex site plan, but they discussed the site plan in depth, and they also discussed rental, the fact that we would be holding these as rental product, pretty in depth. I believe that the criteria that they listed as the official reasoning for rejecting this proposal was consistency with the neighborhood, item number 5. So I thought it would be good just to show this map. This is a Riley County GIS overlay. The red star here is our development. So you can see less than a quarter mile to the east, there is a high-density multifamily development. Less than a third of a mile directly north on Browning, there's a duplex and townhouse development with RLA immediately to the south. And perhaps most prominently, immediately across the road, there are 84 duplex homes, and then adjacent to that, there is an RLA district. So in my opinion, the consistency with the neighborhood is demonstrated in this picture, showing that this housing product is prevalent throughout the neighborhood in all directions. Having said that, we did go back to the drawing board, which is why I'm here tonight. We completely revised our plan to where instead of proposing a 3-unit townhome per lot, which is what we had determined was the maximum number that we could fit on the lot given the development restrictions, we are now proposing to just build 2 duplex lots, or 2 duplexes, so 1 duplex per lot. That change also allows us to individually deed these lots. So in the townhouse product that we had originally proposed, we did not have enough street frontage to have these be separately deeded, so we were going to hold them as rentals. These would be separately deeded. We would have enough street frontage to do that. They would be marketed as for sale units. The result is that we are only adding 2 additional units. Again, all units would be single family attached owner occupied units. As I mentioned, I did meet with the neighborhood after the planning board. I was able to meet with the HOA board, which I believe some of them are here tonight. I felt like we had a really productive conversation. If you watch the meeting minutes, or if you watch the meeting from the planning board, you saw that many of the public comments indicated that a duplex plan would be acceptable. Again, this request is still to stay low, so this is still a residential low district. It just would allow us to build attached single-family homes. Additionally, we estimate that this would add back about $800,000 to $1 million in property valuations. To summarize, this utilizes a vacant, undeveloped lot. It is less dense than the immediate surrounding neighborhood, both in terms of lot coverage and units per acre. It is a consistent use with the Manhattan Urban Area Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map, and it meets a goal identified in the housing market analysis by providing missing middle housing critical for workforce housing. I will leave you with this tonight. This proposal will not solve our housing crisis in Manhattan. This is only 4 units, but it is a start. And my hope is that this can demonstrate that as a community, we are dedicated to finding opportunities and finding tangible ways to implement the strategies indicated necessary in our housing market analysis to strengthen our housing stock here in Manhattan. So I truly do appreciate your consideration of this request. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Tyler?
Just other than to say I appreciate your willingness to compromise. Sure. I think the neighborhood, we'll yet to hear from them, but sure. I assume that they are more satisfied. And my question is to Stephanie, actually, about the proposal went to the planning board as 3 units, duplexes, or whatever. And now that without the planning board's consideration, the proposal has changed to 2. Which it may be a good idea, but does the planning board do they have a role in reconsidering now that the proposal has changed?
Yes and no. I would go back to say that we should not be considering site plans as part of a rezoning because it could be any of the intended uses. That's why I presented that slide earlier so that you could see you're not just rezoning to allow for duplexes, you would be rezoning to allow for any of those permitted uses. Again, though, I agree with Tyler's assessment and reviewing the minutes. There was a lot of weight that was given to the townhome site plan. However, I would have the same conversation with the planning board members that we should not be putting weight into a specific site plan. And that is something that will be doing differently as staff as we present items, is making sure that there is not a accompanying site plan that people focus on, that it's more of what all the permitted uses that something could be with that zoning district.
Yeah, and I would add back that was largely my fault. I wanted to provide plenty of information, and I think it largely sidetracked the whole conversation with the planning board, where the review criteria really were not reviewed. I think the planning board vote was a lot closer than it maybe looks. We did have, I think there was one new member and one absent member during that vote. But again, that was largely my fault for showing that. But to go back to your comment about compromise, in all of my meetings with the neighbors that I was able to meet with, I told them that, one, I plan on being a developer in this town for a lot of years, and two, I plan on being a good neighbor, and so I do strongly believe that there's got to be some give and take on both directions. So while the duplex site plan is harder for us to make work financially, it still does provide for that missing middle housing, and it is a fair compromise that we're willing to do.
How long have you been in business, Frontier Management?
We have been, will be 10 years this October here in Manhattan.
And you're planning on staying?
We are certainly planning on staying, and a lot of this is, or some of this, I serve on the Workforce Housing Committee, and some of this is self-centered. I'm not a large employer, but I have several employees in town, both on our construction side and our management side, and they struggle to find housing. And so we know that this would be a product that would be more attainable than a single-family home, even just for our employees.
All right. Don't leave the building, but have a seat here.
Thank you.
All right, we will go ahead and open up public comment. Please come up. Since this is the first time we've heard about this, we will allow 5 minutes per person like we did the first time we heard the other rezoning. State your name, where you live, or if you have representing somebody. And we will not debate you or answer questions, but take everything under advisement.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Thomas Weeks. I live at 11520 Kirtner Lane.
Pick a microphone.
11520 Kirtner Lane in St. George, Kansas. Went to Kansas State, now work in Manhattan. We actually bought in St. George because of the affordability. I also know Tyler. This is a developer that we want to keep in Manhattan. It is difficult for people to find housing, especially at the bottom of the economic spectrum, not for just very cheap housing, but high quality housing. We have an infill opportunity of vacant ground that we need more of. And so we should be supporting Tyler, keeping him in town as long as possible, but also supporting the people in our town looking for their first time home buyer situation. And a duplex is the exact kind of thing that we want to see more of in Manhattan. The vacant ground needs to be developed in a way with as many units as possible. There's duplexes across the street. There's no reason why we shouldn't be doing duplexes on the other side. So hope you take that in consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Please come on up, sign the sheet, state your name, where you live. Please.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Marie Martin. I live at 2834 Kelly Circle, which is across the street from the Browning property that we're discussing here tonight. I am an owner and resident for the past 7 years in North Point Townhomes. I have observed that the parcel of land on Browning that we're discussing tonight has been in a state of flux since I moved to North Point, and it is a difficult area to develop. I admire Tyler for taking on this challenge, but now with alleged future needs for housing in Manhattan, there is a significant interest in developing it, perhaps to a point of overdeveloping it with too many dwellings if it goes beyond like the 2 duplex situation. Currently, North Point residents note noise disturbances very late at night on Browning Avenue. It turns into a racetrack with loud noises coming from the street that's disturbing to our neighbors that live on North Point Street inside of the complex, which the back of those duplexes face Browning Avenue. The noise comes from loud pickup trucks, motorcycles, and loud mufflers on vehicles. During the school day, traffic is very heavy from both directions going to Anthony and Marlette. A lot of children and their parents walk on the sidewalks, and it would be putting more traffic in that area could reach a point of oversaturation for the people walking on the sidewalks. The development has indicated in the past this would be for housing for young professionals, and that age range is from 20 to 40 years old. We also have a concern about noisy partying at night, overflow parking over into the North Point complex, and loud noises coming from the area of the duplexes. North Point does have 84 units on 13 acres. We are a community there, as are the other people that live on Browning, from Kimball up to Anthony. We go caroling at Christmas time, weather permitting, and we have neighborhood potlucks on the driveway. The grass is mowed once a week, and trees and shrubs are trimmed regularly. The proposed development is not a fit at this time for this area. Thank you for your consideration.
All righty.
So, Marie, you're saying the 2 duplexes are not a fit?
At this time.
Okay.
When will they be a fit? Marie, is there a time you foresee that 2 duplexes would be a fit for that area?
It's a difficult lot if you've not seen it.
I know, I've been by it. yeah.
Okay.
And I used to live over there, and I know it
Okay.
slopes like crazy to
Yeah,
this because
it's-
the 93 flood, all the water
It's
came in the
bad
backyard.
from that power line down, so it's difficult. The first proposal was way over the top of trying to put too much there. Our complex is concerned about the noise level, like I
Sure, okay.
alluded to. And if you would just, well, do you drive down Browning when you go at school time?
Yeah. I haven't lately, but,
Yeah.
okay, so,
Yeah, there's just a lot of kids there.
sure. Okay.
And it just, I know, and also it's going to take 2 cuts to get to those duplexes. 1 cut's there now, but those people living over there are going to have to come out of there, cross 2 lanes of traffic. Well, the second lane will get them to go south on Browning or to get into the traffic that's going north on Browning. So it's just going to be a nightmare.
Okay, all right, thank you. I
Yes,
shouldn't have
you're welcome.
interacted there. Come on back up, next one.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Drock. I live at 2838 Kelly Circle. As a resident of North Point, I was one that Tyler alluded to that said that I prefer single-family residence, but I would be agreeable to duplexes. It's interesting to note on the duplexes possibly what type of garage would be there and how large.
I've heard possibly 1,500 square feet. So the garage, if we're a single-car garage, that could mean possibility of parking in the North Point area. Football games, we have parking in the North Point area. Of course, at football games, when they're well attended, parking comes at a premium. Being city-owned, we can't charge for parking, although maybe we could start. Again, concern, as was pointed out earlier, was traffic. Browning carries a lot of traffic, especially during school time. Don't think I have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Luann.
I'm Luann Miller. I own my family home on Parkway, which is 2 lots away from this. I don't feel this RLA fits, I guess you could say, on the east side of Brownie. It's all residential. I know across from North, there's North Point. When that was brought to the city, it wanted to be twice as big. He came in with twice as much to go in there. I don't feel it's the neighborhood's problem that he overpaid for 2 lots and has to build big to compensate what he spent. I know everybody says, where are we gonna do it? There's a house here, there's a house there. I don't know if on his duplexes, if it's gonna be 2 driveways, 1 for each lot. There's gonna be small, narrow lots. I'm kind of concerned the size on utilities, how much more drainage, especially if it was bigger, how's that gonna affect the sewer lines, everything else, where it's connecting. If you guys go and vote for an RLA, he doesn't have to go with this plan. He can go with anything. So he can go back to his original. I think it basically needs to stay RL because that's what the whole neighborhood is. When Snowbird got brought into the city limits, the city said it didn't make sense for us to stay county this U shape. So why would you put a little U shape RLA in RL? I think, and shady might not be the right word, but if developers are going to be able to start saying, I want to rezone this, but I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do, I don't think that's great for the community, residents, business. I mean, why are we going to that? I think he needs to go back to the planning board, and I think it needs to be stated what we're going to put there. Because if RLA means he can put any of those categories, he can come back to you guys and say, I'm putting 2, 3 plexes there. So I think for me to be safe, I'm comfortable with it staying RL. I didn't overpay for 2 lots. I don't think the neighbor should be responsible to help him on his poor decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Marvin.
Good evening. My name is Marvin Roth. I live at 2859 Kelly Drive in the North Point Homeowners Association. Currently, I'm the president of the association. I want to tell you, first of all, that I've lived in Manhattan over 30 years. I lived in Candlewood when they decided to put up Westchester. You talk about a change in your dynamics when you talk about traffic, and our house wasn't far from it.
So what we're talking about now is simply a duplex, hopefully, or 2 duplexes. There's a couple of questions that come to mind. If indeed we say, yay, let's put duplexes in there, what assurance do we have when it's zoned for multifamily that only a duplex is going to be built? Is there something in the rules that indicates what he can put on there? The other issue I have is the parking. When he first showed us some of the drawings, they had garages, but I'm not sure there's going to be enough room for parking. That's the only other issue. I think the idea is a good one. I think duplexes would work there. The only other duplex that's close to it is about a block away. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Marvin, there's a few of the North Point townhouses that are rentals, aren't they? People have bought them and are renting them out. One out of
There's
4.
There's one that's a rental.
And you haven't run them out yet? What are you guys doing?
There's a lot of football houses,
I bet, yeah. Weekend residents?
weekend residents.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Peter Opelt. I live at 3117 Ella Lane, so just west on Kimball from Browning. My backyard actually backs up to the, I can't remember the name of the apartment complex, and we're just down the street from the Sandstone Apartments. Really doesn't have too much, we've lived there for 3 years. It's not really that bad for traffic. Neighbors are neighbors. They will make some noise, regardless if it's a single family or a multifamily home. I walk my 7-year-old son home from school. He goes to Marlette. We walk down Browning almost every day. I think, given the natural constraints of the property, they're not going to be able to put a whole lot much more density there, and it is right across the street from a development of duplexes. So I think that it fits a need, and I'm in support of it.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Donna?
Does this one work? Donna Shinkamlin, 1922 Leavenworth Street. I had an opportunity to review the notes of the first meeting in which the public had an opportunity to express their concerns. And I noted that there were a lot of fears about students renting and questions as to whether that was compatible with family and owner property next to it. It's natural for people, I think, who've lived in Manhattan as long as I have, to associate students with rentals. And yet we know we've come to a pause in our community history in which the decline in student enrollment and the increase in career opportunities sets our earlier model on its head of who's a property renter and who's an owner. And it's in that pausing point that I think this zoning opportunity gives us a chance to think about the word attached, since that's the only difference really between the two definitions. And I had a chance to reflect on attachment of properties in rental or in owned. When I ran the 2-year project called Community Solutions to Affordable Housing, and we had over 2 years a lot of interviews with people, many of them postdocs or new residents, young professionals, who talked about coming from other cities in which attachment actually spelled security. Under good management, multiplexes with shared walls and security gave some, especially young professional women, a sense of more security than living in a detached, or certainly taking the responsibility for home ownership. And in reflecting that, I realized that there are also some apartment complexes. I know of one on Anderson in which professionals have matured, gotten older, and feel secure because of that attachment, it is higher density housing, and they've accommodated themselves to traffic, but they've been able to live their lives in units that are dense and surrounded by neighborhoods such as the one I live in, which there is a predominance of owner-occupied houses. So I think this is an opportunity for us to reflect on the changing demands on housing and on housing tenure. There are certainly varieties that cross the polarized divide between you're either going to be a renter and a student and very crowded and very noisy, very traffic-prone areas, or you're going to be in a secluded, quiet, and detached house that we need to explore. And some of those include limited equity cooperatives, and I think this is just a good time for us to consider that idea of attachment. To me, it's really about the management. The management of housing itself spells whether we're going to see quality, stability, and opportunities for the workforce who desperately need housing to stay, to make a commitment to stay in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Here comes two. It's a race. All right.
Good evening, Josh Brewer, Manhattan Area Habitat for Humanity. We're an organization that believes that everyone deserves a decent place to live. And in this discussion tonight, we've heard a lot about tenancy, renter versus owner, whether people have loud mufflers or whether they slam their car doors or whether they walk their kids to school or whether they drive their kids to school. And what we know is that we have a housing shortage that is creating critical levels of difficulty in forcing really, really hard conversations about whether housing is acceptable for families to raise their kids in. And we don't say that people with quiet mufflers deserve a decent place to live, or people who don't slam their car doors or don't play their music. We say that everyone deserves a decent place to live. And on Sunday, I went over to these lots, because that's what I do in my free time. And I looked at them and I said, you know, this is really difficult. And hats off to Tyler for, you know, taking a stab at this development. And it's pretty clear that this represents a shift in the neighborhood, because you look to the houses to the left, to the right, and there's single-family homes. You drive up, you can park your car right there. A couple houses down, there was a guy sitting out in his lawn chair drinking a beer. And this will be a shift. But I think it is one that we as a community need to say, we need to make this shift, because otherwise we are not going to create opportunities for people to have a decent place to live. And the shift that we're asking for here is not dramatic. It's not a multiplex. It's not an enormous development. It's simply, can you pull two buildings together so that they're attached, so that a developer can make use of what is otherwise an unusable lot. And in my role at Habitat and as a member of the Workforce Housing Steering Committee, I think I've been exposed to the difficulty in this community of bringing housing to fruition and creating that opportunity. So I wholly support in both of those capacities the rezoning of this land to RLA. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up next.
Good evening. My name is Susan Schwartz. I live at 2016 North Point Drive, so my home backs onto Browning. I also have a dog, and I walk the dog up and down Browning every day, many times a day. And I have, in my walking, witnessed the speeding traffic up and down. And sometimes when I come back, I will see people wanting to avoid the traffic light at Browning and Kimball and cut through North Point. And sometimes they speed through, they ignore the circle, and when I'm walking with my dog where there isn't a footpath, we have been very close to being nearly run over on numerous times. So I do have a concern about the traffic.
I live in a duplex, so I don't really have much against a duplex being there. My concern is there a way through you or the planning board or whoever that we would find out exactly what Taylor wants, rather than he be given a broad, okay, you can put up buildings. And as Tyler does not live in the community, he doesn't really know how it is. Night and day, afternoon, weekdays, heavy traffic time, low traffic time. So that's my concern, is that if you okay his desire to build, that you would know exactly what goes up. 2 duplexes only, and maybe, and yes, garages, parking for the available cars for those buildings, so we don't have additional cars zooming in and out of North Point. Thank you very much.
All right, anybody else?
Hi, I'm Linda Glasgow, 2236 Snowbird Drive. I've lived in my house over 40 years. I've seen the neighborhood change quite a bit, but basically along Browning on the east side, yes, single-family housing has been long established, very stable. I want to thank Stephanie for taking my phone call this afternoon and for her to explain to me that it's not about will there be duplexes. We can't, this isn't going to determine that. It'll be 3 to 5 units permitted per lot. So it could be 5 units per lot if you change the zoning. You're not controlling that. And so this is the great abyss. We don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes it all works out and it's great. And sometimes Tyler might want to sell those lots, and now it'll have really great zoning for a different developer with a different idea of what he or she could put on the lots. So thank you, Stephanie, for telling me something that I did not know. This zoning is not going to be predicated on the current plan of the duplex, or maybe it is. We just don't know. It could be 3 to 5 units. And that's an important thing to me. It's the uncertainty. You buy a house, it's a big investment, and all of a sudden, your world is extremely uncertain. It's not what you thought you were buying when you bought into the neighborhood. There's one thing to be a duplex and one a 5-plex. So that's what I want to stress. Again, thanks, Stephanie.
Anybody else? Going once? Oh, there we got him. You can come over to the other microphone and get started.
Hi, I'm Bobby Flaherty. I live at 2846 Kelly Drive. I think it's boiled down to, having listened to everyone, the fact that by changing the zoning, we are opening up to any source there. Many triplexes, 4plexes, I don't know what the zoning was, but not necessarily a duplex. Even if we agree to a duplex, it's still open to the others to be changed if you can't specify that. The other is, duplex sounds fine, but how many bedrooms in each duplex? And owner occupied sounds good too, but that owner could rent them out. So you could have 4 bedrooms in each duplex or triplex and increase the volume and concern that we have significantly. Beyond that, I think also, will it be an HOA? How do we know it's going to be maintained? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Melinda Marion. I live at 2004 North Point Drive, directly at the corner of Browning and Kimball.
So I do know that traffic very, very well. I see it every single day. And there is a significant drainage issue in this area. The grade of this property is significant and precipitation dependent. There is a slough that comes down to the bottom of that area on the east side of the property. And my concern is that this will be a very similar drainage issue. That is what is near Marlatt Elementary, to, less than a mile to the south, with this additional concrete, you know, with the lack of drainage that's in that area. And just, this is something that traffic in that area is also to the point that there is no way they're going to be able to get out of that area and go on to Browning to the south anytime that there's a game. And anytime that they're, you know, at, 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning, they're going to have to go north. And it's just, there's a lot of issues with the traffic in that area and the drainage that are not insignificant and can be of significant taxpayer cost if that drainage issue is not appropriately addressed.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? One more, or not? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public comment there. Any other questions for Stephanie? I would like Tyler to come on back up here. Yeah, because that is, so because of the big slope of the land, and I suspect a building permit or something, he would have to show his drainage plan. You're gonna have to retain it obviously a little bit down there at the bottom, which shouldn't be hard because it's already sloping all the way that way. What can you tell us to assuage our concerns about the drainage issues brought forward?
Yeah, so drainage is certainly a concern. Originally when we had proposed the 6-unit, the 3 townhomes, that was going to require a drainage study. So what we will most likely do at this point would be to perform a drainage impact study just to determine what sort of detention is needed for the impervious space. I will note that with the development hurdles that this lot presents, the maximum amount that we could figure out how to get onto the lot is about a 12% lot coverage. Both the RL district and the RLA district allow for a 35% lot coverage, so we're under half of the allowable lot coverage already, so it's going to be a small impervious space. It's a little over an acre of land, but we won't be doing anything to the east side.
Okay. Anybody got any questions for Tyler?
Is the city going to be required to build any drainage facility because of this plan?
No. Any drainage that was performed would be at our cost. Can I address you guys with, okay. I know we've been here a while and I want to be respectful of your time, but just 2 comments that I want to quickly cover. One member of the public politely mentioned that we overpaid for the lots. I don't think that we overpaid for the lots. I think the problem with the lots is that even if we had gotten them for $1, the cost of a single-family home at that location does not, the resale value just is not there. So if some sort of product is not able to go in here, these lots are going to continue to remain undeveloped. Additionally, I think you probably picked up that some members were reluctantly accepting of the duplex plan, but were cautious because you can't conditionally rezone. I will say that the only thing that to keep in mind with that is that the lot frontage restricts us from what we can actually build there if it's going to be a for sale product. So as a for sale product, we could not build a 3-unit townhome because we don't have the lot frontage on Browning because it is a narrow lot. So the most we would be able to do in that instance would be the 2 duplexes, 1 per lot.
Are you intending a common driveway or a second curb cut off of Browning?
I haven't discussed that with Public Works in depth. If we can make the existing curb cut work, then that would be our goal. And I don't know if Stephanie can weigh in on that, but I think that they envisioned that there would be a mechanism for us to have a common easement that would serve both duplexes with 1 curb cut, but we'd have to flesh that out.
Yeah, it could be a joint access easement.
Good, that's not a problem. All right. That's all I got for right now. Thank you.
Yep, and I would just encourage you guys, as the last closing comment, that I know that you've heard some opposition today. I do not envy the position that you were in making these difficult decisions. I would encourage you to consider the voices that were not here today. I think you received a letter from the neighbor immediately to the north indicating that she was accepting of this plan. And then I believe we also had a letter from the Flint Hills Builders Association and the Chamber of Commerce endorsing this plan. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have one other question for the staff, just, and I understand the process, but this gets rezoned, and as some people said, technically, you could put 3 to 5 there. What kind of oversight does the city have? I know we can't do that for this, but when they do the development, what's the process? Can the city say, no, you can't put 3 to 5 there later?
No, not like that. We can't conditionally zone it saying you can only have a single family or a duplex structure. But, and Tyler alluded to this, some of that, the bulk regulations, the setbacks, the frontage that's required for some of these development types, that would be reviewed through the building permit process. So they will end up being restricted on what can go there just because these are relatively narrow lots. And that's really the only way that we can.
Yeah, that was my
Condition
point.
on
I
what's
realize, if it gets rezoned, it says, okay, that's open. But my point is, if people have concerns about that, the permit process will control that.
Yeah, and that's an administrative function, so it doesn't have an opportunity to come back before the planning board or the commission. The other opportunity would be what Tyler has kind of discussed with me is we would call it a twin home. So each of the units would be on a separate lot versus the PUD that's immediately across the street. There's like 5 duplexes on one lot there. So each owner would own their half of the duplex as well as the lot that's on it. That would have to go through either a replatting process or some sort of administrative lot line adjustment plat there. So there may be an additional opportunity for folks to weigh in.
Okay, so it'd be difficult to do a bait and switch is my point.
It could be. I haven't looked at the bulk regulations yet to see with townhomes, but I think when Tyler originally showed 3 townhomes, he was really pushing the setbacks on the side yard.
I appreciate Tyler's willingness to compromise, but I do worry about the future when someone does come in with a vague proposal and suddenly there are a lot of units on a site, and I didn't realize we were giving that up with the adoption of the new development ordinance. So the commission might want to pay attention to that and see if there's any, as time goes on, just FYI. If we're ready to have, have you closed the?
The public session's over. I was just gonna give my 2 cents worth here, which is, I'm generally always supportive for more and better housing, especially compared to the house that needed to be demoed long before that. But something has to go on that lot because we just don't have a bunch of land. We can't afford to have a bunch of land sitting empty. Now, there are developers that come and developers that come and stay, and there's developers that come and go, and the difference is they do a quality product and their word is good. So I am going, since he's been here 10 years, I am going to assume that if Tyler tells us, I can't hold you to it, but if he says he's going to put on 2 duplexes, I'm going to take him at his word. And if he doesn't, then don't bother coming here for another rezoning anytime soon because you're untrustworthy. And so that's my perspective would be is that how do we keep him from doing something different? The marketplace and people will, if a developer is shady, then they don't stay long because people figure it out. He's been here 10 years. Obviously, he's doing something right. No rezoning is gonna make less traffic on Browning. It's terrible. I know the road's terrible, and there's nothing we can do to make the traffic less. This is gonna add 24 more trips to the 4,000 already there. you won't notice any difference. I think we should have the police department put up a speeding sign out there and do some patrols sometime. I think that's something that we could, the neighborhood could request from RCPD. But we need more housing. Nobody wants it in their backyard. You got to figure out the drainage thing, because that is a legitimate concern, because that was a problem, like I said, in the 93 flood, water coming down the hill of a big vacant lot. Affected my house on the back of Snowbird Drive also, so I appreciate that's an issue. But that's all I got to say. So I'm supportive of it based on the semi-promise that he wants to do just 2 duplexes.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one because I really didn't get anything from the immediate neighbors that said, hey, I hate this duplex idea, and like we did get letters that said, I support it. So in this case, I don't really see any opposition from the immediate neighbors. And the folks that live over there in Stone Point, across there, they're all in duplexes, so it just doesn't seem consistent to me that if you're living in a duplex, you would not like a duplex. And so that sort of changes that. And I do agree with the mayor. If we got a racetrack out there on Browning because people are speeding at night, I hear that on Hudson sometimes. That's an RCPD issue. That has nothing to do with rezoning. It's not going to make a difference. But we do need to get the police to take a look at that on the traffic and things about noise and people partying. We've got noise ordinances that can get enforced on that. So I don't see that as something that goes into it. Probably wouldn't have supported, the idea that there'd be 6 or 5 houses there, but, the change to the 2 duplexes, that's 4. That seems reasonable and it does fit with the housing plan. So I don't think that, I don't have a good reason to vote no on that.
John, anything?
Yeah, I'm just not going to go back and repeat what the two of you said. I'm just going to say that we're going to have to get used to this. Because if we're going to do this housing project, we're going to come up against this over and over again as we try to develop in these, areas where we've got an isolated lot or where we want to use some of these things that we've talked about. All these incentive packages out there are usually going to mean some higher density in areas that have lower density. And so this is something we're going to have to grapple with. I'm sure you've already looked at it of some way to make something more guaranteed in there. If there's any lever we can do to do that, I'd sure like to, because we assume we're going to have one there maybe we don't know. We still don't know, but we feel pretty good about this one. So it's going to be a tough task.
Linda?
Yes. I will support this. I think it's, I'm glad to see the infill. I'm happy that the developer worked with the neighborhood and listened, and because the neighborhood's as a single family area, I think it's important that we not destroy that fabric as we think about new things and more density. We have to think about this carefully too, because in my view, since I was on the planning board, is if you care a lot about your property and what goes in around you, you better buy it, because anybody can come and do something to the next door. So I'm just, that's kind of become my philosophy over time, because you can't trust anything. So, but anyway, I think this is a good plan. I am glad about the compromise. I think this is palatable to the neighborhood generally, and I agree that a little bit of this extra traffic isn't going to make or break Browning. Browning's already busy. I would say that that it's up to the city to put the speed limit signs up, and then the police to enforce. So I think it's a compatible kind of thing, and I think the city needs to make sure there are enough signs there. So this, I am really concerned about not having enough housing in our community. And despite this one lot, I'm just saying, I do want to work for housing in this community. And I want developers to step forward, because I don't want the city having to pay for housing in our community. We need to kick things off, to incentivize, but it's not our, and about rentals, I prefer a single-family area. Most of you probably do. But I think there's a new day here, and we need to be thinking about what's important to us, because things are going to change. And like I said, buy the property next door if it comes up for sale.
All right, is someone ready to make a motion?
Let me find it.
Too late, I got it. I would move that we override the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board and adopt first reading of an ordinance rezoning a 1.08 acre tract of land generally located northeast of the intersection of Kimball Avenue and Browning Avenue from RL Low Density Residential District to RLA Low Density Residential Attached District based on the findings in the staff report.
I'll second.
Please call the roll. Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hassel.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
All right, we'll move on to the last agenda item, which is a checklist and request for qualifications for development of 10 lots in Lee Mill Village for workforce housing to leverage a MIH grant from the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation.
All right, good evening again. You just stated what this was for, so I will not repeat that, and it is on the slide. Lee Mill Village is located off of Reith Avenue, kind of in the western part of the community. The city has had these 10 lots since, I think, 2018. Now I'm mixing up all my dates between all these items. 2018, Jason? 16? Okay. Apologies. Since 2016, there's been very minimal interest over the years in the redevelopment of these. Some others further to the south, those have since been bought and either are currently owned or are actually already redeveloped. This is, again, a reminder of the type of housing that we need in this area. If there's questions, we can come back and review this, but it's in here for informational purposes. So what we are looking to do, potentially, is we have an RFQ that was in your packet. We're wanting to release that to work with the developer for the redevelopment of these 10 lots. It would be great if we could work with that developer to go after an MIH application in November. The city gets one of those every year, and so that would be our intent. However, even if we weren't awarded that MIH grant opportunity, we would still want to work with that developer to see what this could become and get it back on the tax rolls. MIH, as a reminder, it's a competitive grant only for vertical construction, so the building, and it could be for single or multifamily projects, anything in between. KHRC, the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, is the entity at the state that oversees the allocation of those funds. They have a broader definition of workforce housing than we do. It goes up to 150 area median income. Our local definitions between 60 and 120% AMI. For this, the city would be the applicant, so we would work with the developer to put together a proposal, but then we have to be the one that actually submits that, and it would provide up to $650,000 for construction of those housing units. This is kind of a two-part series here. One is really about the RFQ, which we are needing your action on this evening. But the other item was to bring before you some work we've been doing on MIH screening criteria. So we have two parts for this: a screening checklist, which are just the minimum requirements that have to be met in order to submit a grant. And then you'll see the scoring matrix that we have at the end. That's really to be able to weigh different proposals against each other. So here, just very, I won't go through all of these. They're pretty self-explanatory. One of them on there is that the property is properly zoned. I think that we've had several examples recently of why we want to make sure that we have zoning before proceeding with an MIH application. So that is something that MIH or KHRC kind of recommends, but they don't necessarily require. But I think it would be a good practice for us to make that part of our checklist. Let's see. We also have on here that a preliminary MIH application was submitted. So our thought is if we put out a call for MIH applications, the applicants or the people providing us a proposal would have to kind of fill out a draft MIH application. So we make sure that they can fill in all of the blanks that KHRC would require. And then if it is in the floodplain, we would have that project reviewed by the city's floodplain administrator just to make sure that it's in compliance with our floodplain regulations. Continuing on, these are really the three that are we took from KHRC. So making sure that the percentage of the total project cost is consistent with the number or the percentage of units that are within that workforce housing range. So the example here, if 25% of the total project cost is requested from MIH, then at least a minimum of 25% of the total units need to be within that workforce housing range. The project would have to fall, we're seeing right now, within our local definition of workforce housing, so between that 60 and 120. Again, KHRC would allow us to go up to 150% AMI. That's really up to you all if you want us to do that, or if you want to stick with our local workforce housing definition. And then per our local definition of workforce housing, if we kept it at that 120% AMI, the maximum rent there, you can see $1,850, and then the maximum purchase price would be $250,000. We also have to provide some sort of mechanism, or the developer would have to provide some sort of mechanism to ensure that future rents and sale prices would fall within that workforce housing range for a minimum of 5 years. Again, that is a requirement of KHRC. And there's several different ways that we can structure that. I should also say that our area median income, it does shift as we take in consideration inflation. So we're not just stuck at that $250,000 over the next 5 years. It would increase as well. And then the last set of the screening checklist, these are also MIH criteria. So there's certain accessibility requirements that they've included in the application for MIH. The developer would have to complete a KHRC environmental checklist that looks at energy efficiency, different window ratings, insulation, and then it also has to indicate whether it's going to be construction of new units, and those can be owner-occupied, only can be owner-occupied, and then also for the renovation and rehabilitation of units, those would also have to be owner-occupied. We cannot displace any residents that are currently living there. So if the project is currently habited, we cannot evict somebody in order to renovate those units. And I'm questioning this now. I'm going to go double check that if you guys have conversation. I'm pretty sure that we can do rental units with new construction. This is the scoring criteria that we proposed. This is just a way for staff to use it internally in order to weigh different proposals and to make a recommendation to you. You, of course, could deviate from that recommendation, but we would just like to have something as a way to bring one forth. We did a couple of kind of mock scorings, and really what the tiebreaker that we needed to have several times was the number of workforce housing units that was created. That was really how we got our kind of our cost benefit, and would be able to make a recommendation to you. Any questions on any of these criteria specifically that you wanted me to go over?
Looks awesome.
Okay. It's pretty basic. Then the last thing here is a timeline for the November MIH. I know we kind of caught some heat that we didn't go after the June application, but you can see here, even starting in May, this is how long we have to back up in order to get an application through for November. This does take into consideration any rezoning that would have to occur, and that is a fairly lengthy process given some state statute requirements as far as notice, but then also just working through the planning board and the city commission and the two readings that you have of those ordinances. We did not, so we did send this out, the MIH request for anybody that maybe that needed to have a rezoning for the November application. I think right now we have one that we're processing for a rezoning, but that's the only interest that we had. And I'm going to stop there and just kind of remind you that the MIH criteria are somewhat separate from that, the RFQ that you have before you for Lee Mill Village. They could be linked if we apply for MIH, which is why we're presenting them together tonight. And I believe, Mayor, you asked to have something to react to of the type of projects that we would bring forth. So I think that kind of fulfills that request. Anything that you would like me to go back and cover, or any questions you have on the RFQ?
I have, with regard to, there's no page, it's called, the header is MIH screening checklist. And it, back another one, that's it, yeah. The funding request percentage is equivalent to the percentage of MIH units. If 25% of the total project cost is requested from MIH, at least, at minimum, 25% of the total units should be within the workforce housing range.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't more units within the workforce housing range?
So this is just minimum requirement of MIH. If we go and look at the scoring criteria, which we would use internally to make a recommendation for you, the more, if you look at number 2, that's where the more units that you put in of workforce housing, the more points that you would receive. So the screening checklist is really just you meet all of KHRC's minimum requirements. The scoring criteria is how we would evaluate which one to recommend for you. If all of them meet the minimum requirements, how are we going to differentiate of which one we want to move forward with, since we only get one MIH application per round?
Didn't realize, I thought it was each time they had a competition, but it's one a year is what
Per
you're
round.
saying.
So right now it could be up to 3 times a year.
3 times, not just once.
Yep, but then we also, this is a little bit weird, but the county can also support an application even if it's a property that's within the city limits. So if we did have 2 proposals and the county didn't have one coming forward, we could always look at asking them to support one. Probably not the Lee Mill Village one, that seems like it should stay with us, but if there was another one, we could ask them to support that project.
I'd like to work with them to, housing has to be, we have to stress it. We have to push. I mean, we're pushing you to get an application by November, and hopefully another one by the next round. But I also think we want to be careful of what we're about what we're doing. But I do support this local definition of
workforce housing?
Workforce housing,
Okay.
income-wise. It's important that we stress workforce housing. And we have a lot of housing for upper income, but not a lot of housing for lower. And that's where the rub is, I think. So anyway, what is attachment C? You've mentioned it in your materials, but I can't find anything in the packet that is attachment C.
So that's part of the KHRC application, and that is the accessibility requirements.
Okay.
Some of this is rather vague, so KHRC kind of, they even contradict themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how that plays out, but we have a question into them to clarify that item.
Have they been responsive when you've asked?
It appears what they're doing is when we send in questions, they compile those from across the state, and then they'll end up issuing an addendum to their FAQ that they put out.
Okay.
So we eventually get our questions answered through this massive redlined document.
Have you gotten any yet, or is that all coming in a big batch?
We've received 2 FAQs now.
Okay.
And each one they add, as people have questions, they try to address those. Okay. But I think this is they have a lot of money they haven't typically had. They're trying to work through some of this as well.
It's new to them.
It is.
Imagine trying to write rules for all of that.
Yep.
Well, I'm encouraged, and I'm glad there's an application. I'm glad that the application has to do with the land that the city bought at the tax sale, and we will finally get rid of it.
That is our hope.
From we won't have to pay property taxes on it.
Let's get started.
Okay, so on the 25% of that one, So, so if it's, is it 600 or 650,000? What's the maximum?
650,000.
So if they're only gonna do 25%, yeah, they'd have to do a $2.6 million project for 25% of it to be 650,000. And so but if they only do like $1.5 million, or $1.3 million, let's keep the math easy, then they could do 50%. The MIH can, yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm.
If
what the
they
point is.
request the full 650,000 MIH, and let's say that it's a $1 million project, if they're doing 100% of their units as workforce housing, they could receive the whole 650,000. It's just if they're wanting to, if they're not doing all of the units as workforce housing, that's when KHRC would start restricting how much you could actually receive.
So it would be more, okay, so, but it's still at the 25% of the cost of the project. So if it's a $2 million project, they could still get up to 500,000.
They could still get up to 650,000.
Oh, you can't, okay, so
But
it's,
they would just have to have the same, whatever that percentage is of the total project cost, that's at least the minimum amount of workforce housing units they would have to have.
okay, very good, all right. Let's make it happen. Is there a motion or anything we got to do?
I just want to touch a few things on Lee Mill Village, if I might.
Uh-oh.
With those 10 remaining lots, they're obviously the 10 last of 52 lots. If you think about the prior relationship things for developers, Canyon Creek and Jill Jacoby in the past that allowed them to proceed. We have site challenges with these final 10. They have been tough to move, and I would just plant a seed with you all that you're likely to receive some proposals that look to or ask or insinuate the city participate in infrastructure. There's additional streets, there's a cul-de-sac, there's possible relocation of utilities to facilitate future developments. They're tough slots. There's no bones about it. It's going to be difficult for somebody to come in here and propose something on this property. But with MIH and potentially with a portion of the 10% that can go for workforce housing, we might be able to put a package together. The conversations that we've had with developers, they recognize the challenges, as do we. So put together a proposal and let's start talking about getting these back on the tax roll.
So there is utilities, all those tan ones on the left. There's utilities and special assessments on those lots.
The water.
You can't just let it go native and ignore them.
Well, we're getting closer to the point where the specials are being paid off, but we're paying them.
Okay.
The city, the taxpayers are paying those. So we'd love to get them back into the private hand as soon as we possibly can. But water, sewer, storm, and some streets were included in those original specials. Now, we have a few years left with those. So we have a remaining bill. Previously we were asking people to pay those off and we would transfer the land. I'm just suggesting to you to prepare yourselves for proposals that could include more than that as an act for the city to participate, not only in that, but potentially in future infrastructure.
Well, if there's such lousy pieces of land, why would they ever try to plat them and do all that?
Well, they're ours and we might be able to give them a deal.
Okay, but originally, I'm thinking 10 years ago. when
William
it first-
Crabtree and his vision for all those townhomes? Yeah.
was a crazy man.
Well, I mean, it was a lot of townhomes in one area.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Stephanie.
I want to point out that it matters too when a developer goes under. And the cost of all of these lots, the burden it has been on the city, I would even hesitate to ask that be tallied up because it's that bad. And now we may have more burden because of infrastructure. And stormwater is never cheap. So, it's a good, I appreciate Jason running the flag up the pole.
Yeah, I think it's a great project tying these two together. We've been working on this Lee Mill thing since 2011. I got elected the first time. It was all vacant and there were pipes sticking out of the ground. And so we've made tremendous progress so far, and this will be the last piece. If this works, excellent.
All right, let's see if there's any public comment on this item. You just give us a thumbs up, Donna, if you'd like. Come on up, Josh.
Good
Good evening, Josh Brewer, Manhattan Habitat. I am excited to see an MAH application going forward, as I think I've been a broken
You've pushed it.
needle on this, that, we need to apply for these funds. We're hoping that there's going to be MAH ARPA still available as well, so this is the $650,000 award. If there's MAH ARPA, that could be the $3.5 million award that either the city or the county could be the applicant of record for. There's kind of two pieces of information that have been presented here. One is the scoring criteria, which is really helpful to see. The other is this project for the RFQ. I did go out yesterday and I walked to these lots. And previously, I know we work with Bayer quite a bit on our site prep, and had Kelly and Neil go out there and take a look at them as well. Because about 3 years ago, we had students at K-State run a study on these lots, because we know that these are a significant challenge for the city and potentially an opportunity for a community housing developer. There are potential opportunities for the roundabout area for development there if you did a density development, if you really thought outside the box. These lots, as Jason has shared, these lots up here that have the steep embankment are going to be really, really difficult. I was really trying to think outside the box yesterday on these up here. And I think it's worth considering whether this is the site where we should take a swing at MIH. And I am curious how this site was chosen, because I know we've been talking about other sites, and there's been a bit of ambiguity. Where are we going to, if we're going to submit an MIH application, where should we submit one? And so it's a little out of left field to see this site be brought forward. I know on the Workforce Housing Steering Committee, we received a message on Friday indicating that this was going to come forward, and I heard in the city manager's briefing last week that this was going to come forward. So I would like a little bit more clarification on that, and whether that is a public decision or not. I know we are working with another city on an MIH application, and very early in the process, they indicated their site. And so this feels like a shift, and I'd just like a little bit more clarification on that. But otherwise, very excited.
It's because it's almost free land.
It's low-hanging
Almost.
fruit.
If someone wants to take it on,
No such thing as free land.
well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right, thanks. Anybody else?
Hi again, my name's Thomas Weeks. It seems like it's kind of a foregone conclusion that the city is going to put in an application for this particular project, even though in the same conversation we are adding criteria, make that a public thing. I agree with Josh. I've been following this for a while. MIH isn't new. What's new is that Manhattan has recently qualified. We've already missed multiple rounds. Part of the reason for missing it is because of the size of our city government. We've put roadblocks in our own way, and we haven't been able to move quickly. It's kind of already assumed, but the MIH ARPA, the $3.5 million, we're probably going to miss that. Like, we can't use it anywhere else if we don't put that application in. MIH can also be done as two applications. It doesn't just have to be one for the $650,000. We could also go for a second application for the $3.5 million in addition to the $650,000, but that ARPA funding is going to run out. So my question to you all is, I get that this is a problem for the city, that we've had this for a long time, but is this the best place to apply for a very competitive application? The further we get down the timeline, the more cities such as Manhattan or cities who are realizing this funding exists are going to start applying. But a ton of money's gone into other communities. Hayes, Salina, even towns as small as Alma have gotten this funding, and Manhattan didn't. We have to remember that this is competitive. We're competing against other cities for this funding. So when the KHRC group reviews this land and they realize these problems and the building versus they might see something that's easier to build on in another city, are they going to actually go for this? So it's not really going to be free land. And then my other question is, what happens if we don't get MIH? So we spend all this time trying to find a developer, putting out the criteria, and then we submit an application and don't get it because it wasn't as competitive as it should have been. So just a couple of things to think about. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment here. Yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, if we, just because we have an our RFP will strictly be, that we're putting out is for this, but developers know, but he could come up with a project on a different piece of land and we could still submit it. And if it looks, it's got more housing, because we may not get any developers to bite on this thing either, even with the MIH help. What else do I need to know about that?
No, that's correct. And as Jason pointed out, we still have a 10% of a workforce housing sales tax. So we could use a portion of that to either match an MIH, a successful MIH award, or if we elect not to go after the Lee Mill for MIH, we could use that sales tax to help support development of those lots. I just wanted to clarify, so the last 2 rounds, I believe, there's been a $650,000 MIH award, and then there's been the MIH ARPA, which is up to $3 million. There's some speculation that there's not going to be any ARPA round in November, which is why I didn't bring that up. But of course, if we are notified, and it's typically about maybe 2 months ahead of when the application's due, if we do get word that there's going to be an ARPA round, we could have up to 2 applications, one for the $650,000, one up to $3 million. So that would be something that we'd bring back before you for direction.
All right.
The other comment I'd like to make, this out of left field application for Lee Mill Village is, to our knowledge, the only piece of property in town actually zoned appropriately for the use that's being proposed. There are other pieces of property, and I know the people in the audience know those pieces of property probably better than I do, but they're not zoned appropriately. And if tonight and the last 3 weeks have been any indication of just how hard it is to predict how zoning is going to go in a residential neighborhood, Browning's the example. A 1-5 vote at the planning board and a 4-0 vote at the commission. It's a very difficult thing to predict. And it's difficult for staff to sit here and tell people, go invest the time, effort, and energy in something when it's not zoned appropriately. And if it get an MIH application involved, now you've got money coming into the equation, into a zoning process, which makes it even more difficult for you all. So it may appear as if it came out of left field, but it is a piece of property we've owned for quite a few years that is zoned appropriately to move forward with an application. And Stephanie's absolutely right. We have $8 million we need to spend in the next 10 years on affordable workforce housing. That's a challenge. And we have to think through how to do this in a way that we can sustain ourselves and keep investing in it for the next 10. $8 million will go fast if we put it to product and start generating some results in our community. Or it can sit there and we can struggle in the last 3 years as to what we're going to do with it. We'd like to start investing now. We didn't choose Lee Mill Village. Lee Mill Village chose us. So I'm trying to make the best, and we've been trying to make the best as an organization and as a community of this piece of property for a long time. And I've sat down with a lot of people who have been highly critical of the city for Lee Mill Village. And I always have to remember the name William Crabtree, because most of the people who sit down with me don't even know who that is. You know, when Tim sold this land to William and he came in and he got it zoned and he got it annexed, he got everything in right. He got all the infrastructure put in place. And then he stopped. That's not likely in Manhattan and on very many occasions, but here we are. Four Winds was another example. You know, we just run into these product areas. Fortunately, Four Winds had enough interest from the development community to move it forward. They're just, the obstacle on this piece of property was massive. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, massive. So I appreciate the criticism. I appreciate the question. We're looking for anything we can possibly do on this property to get it back on the tax rolls and usable by the community. And here's an application and an opportunity to do that.
All right, any other questions?
I would just like to point out that I'm not willing to spend any of the sales tax money on these. We've already dumped so much money, as Jason has been discussing, into this, that I want our sales tax money to go as far as possible, and I think the infrastructure on this will be weighty financially.
All right, does someone want to make the motion on this thing?
Yeah, I move that we authorize city staff to seek requests for qualifications from developers to develop 10 lots in the Lee Mill Village for workforce housing.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the motion. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hassel,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
That is the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the June 20th, 2023 City Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hassel,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Very good. The meeting's adjourned. Have a good evening.